Servus and hello, Matthias here, and this is Singletrack. In this episode, we approach the mountains a bit differently. Rather than running, we'll climb. I have with me ecologist and climate scientist, activist and world-class climber Lena Müller, calling in from Innsbruck, Austria. Lena is originally from the Allgäu in Germany, but currently working on her doctorate at the University of Innsbruck, where she's studying the effects of climate change on mountain ecosystems. As a climber, she's keenly aware of our individual challenges and tensions on how we get to enjoy the outdoors. The weekly drives to trailheads, the constant purchases of new gear, the travel to races, or, in her instance, popular crags. For the Innsbruck region, she's published a sustainable climbing guide where she lays out ways to get to the best climbing spots via public transportation and encourages a more sustainable lifestyle. This focus, passion, and knowledge she brings to Singletrack. I hope you enjoy this conversation and feel challenged and inspired to find meaningful ways in your life to take our climate crisis serious. This is Singletrack, and I have a super special guest with me today, Lena Müller. From where are you calling in now exactly?
So right now I'm in Germany, but I live in Innsbruck, and I'm just visiting here because I had COVID, and now I'm staying here for longer to recover a bit. And yeah.
Where in Germany are you at?
So I'm from the Allgäu region, which is like the very southern part of Germany. It's like 10 minutes to the Austrian border. It's really nice. I really love growing up here. You have a lot of mountains, and you can go climbing and ski touring, and it's really a nice area.
So you are, the Schwabians would call it not a Reichsschmackter. So you actually grew up in Allgäu?
Yeah.
Okay,
I grew up here.
So what made you then go to Innsbruck? Or Innsbruck?
That's a dialect. Yeah, that's right. That's actually how I say it, Innsbruck. So I went there to study. I did my bachelor in biology there, and then my master in ecology, and now I'm doing my PhD there.
Wow, super. So give me a little bit of a. So I'm going to dive right into a really hard question. So one of my favorite German podcasts is Hallo, Grüezi, Servus. Are you aware of that podcast? So it's a podcast from the Zeit magazine, and it's a German podcast, or German language podcast, where a German, a Swiss, and an Austrian talk about the similarities and differences in their countries and cultures. And it's super, super fascinating. But one guy, the Austrian guy, he floats between Vienna and Innsbruck, and he loves, I think he is originally from Innsbruck. So let me start off with a really hard question, and I don't know, it's probably wrong to ask that question so early on. So living in Innsbruck, because it's one of these interesting challenges, because you as somebody with your age and your focus and your passions and everything, Innsbruck is a reasonably within a reasonably conservative region. How do you balance it? Does it even feel like that because you're in the city and the city is full of college students? Or, from a political larger picture, how does it feel like living as a modern woman with modern focuses in a reasonably conservative region?
Well, to be honest, I think I'm quite lucky because, like, working at the university, I'm surrounded by like people from all over the world, like with different backgrounds. And as you said, it's like a college city, so there are a lot of students. So I think I'm not really, like, I don't experience a lot of these conservative viewpoints, but I think so I think I'm really lucky to live there and to live there for the last 10 years, because it's really different in like where I grew up, because it's also really conservative here. And I think you just have to fight more for for what's important to you if people are that conservative. But yeah, I'm lucky to have experienced like a lot of like people from all over the world that have maybe more modern viewpoints.
Yeah. Does that Like you can surround yourself with the people of a similar mindset, but when you follow politics, regional politics and stuff, does that get frustrating sometimes? I mean, it's
Yes.
politics. It always gets
Yeah.
frustrating, right? But
Yeah. Yeah, it gets frustrating. I think that's the case for a lot of people. But yeah, of course, if you only look into what they do, for example, right now, like close to Innsbruck, there's like a new power station they built, and it's at a river that is like, yeah, it's a protected river, and as an ecologist, that just like drives you crazy. So yeah, but I think that's the case for a lot of regions.
no, it's true. It's true. It was a very sort of narrow question that I asked so super early on. Lena, let's circle completely all the way back. You are on the show. And it is interesting because you're not really a trail runner. You are an action climber. You sort of do a completely different sport. Before we dive into your whole professional line, tell us a little bit about. So you grew up in the Allgäu. How do you gravitate towards climbing? Give us a little bit of an overview of how you become a climber.
So I've started climbing with my parents when I was really young. So my parents, like, they only climb a bit, like up to, I don't know, like 6A or something. And then I just went climbing a lot here in the Allgäu with my friends, and I never did any like competition climbing. I think that's like um, it doesn't really fit me. And then I moved to Innsbruck for studying, but yeah, also because you can climb there. And I spent a lot of time in the rocks. And then I, I think it's like 2 years ago when I then became the first German woman to climb B9, which is like a tread climb. It's located in Bürs, in Vorberg, in Austria. And tread climbing is basically where you, place all the protection yourself. So it's like really challenging, but it's great because it's really intense. That makes it really a great thing to do. And so that route I did by train, so by public transport, and I think this had a huge impact. And since then, I'm like more into like talking publicly about climbing and how you can do this more like climate friendly in a way. And yeah, this has been my story, and I just enjoy it a lot. So climbing, it's like still, although it's like become part of my job now, it's really nice because you can, you spend time outside, and you just, your mind is like free when you climb.
Yeah.
But I think it's the same for a lot of sports.
It is interesting that you say your mind is free, because for me, as somebody who's dabbled in climbing, I always carried a fear with me too much. I think that's why I gravitated towards trail running, because I still get that adventure, but I don't have that feeling of being in a place where I'm completely exposed, where I'm, as a trail runner, really, I mean, you could fall down a mountainside. There are some exposed sections, but in general, it feels a very safe sport, but you still get that adventure. You had said you climbed that route and you went there with public transportation, and it had a huge impact. If you say impact on you personally, that like a light bulb went off and you're like, oh my gosh, this is the future? Or sort of in the media that people were like, wait a second, you did that in what way?
Maybe both. So what I meant was like in the media, because like I didn't think that it was such a big thing that you could do it by public transport, but like the media was, or the climbing media was like really interested in like this part of the story. But I think it also changed a lot for myself, because like during that time when I tried that route, it was like the first time I ever tried something that hard by public transport. And I was like, okay, let's see, does it work out? Like, can you still climb hard? Like, I mean, climb hard at my own limit. Is that like, still possible? And it was like, okay, so now there are no excuses. If you can climb that route, okay, then it's obvious you can, like, this is something that you can do and you can implement in your like daily life or your holiday, like vacations. And so I think it was both, like for me, and also yeah, for the media.
It is interesting, right? Because I think we need those kind of outlier stories of not just like, okay, I did that and I had a fun little weekend, but you actually did something super hard on top of it, right? So the story in the media was perhaps the public transportation part, but the climbing was extraordinary too. So tell people a little bit who have no idea, how far from the train station away did you live? So give us sort of the time segments. I needed to bike or walk that long, how the train ride was, and then from the train to the crag it was this long, and how long was the route, and then backwards, just to kind of give people sort of an idea how long that entire project was.
Yeah. So
Roughly,
yeah.
you don't have to be perfectly accurate.
So actually, it took quite some time to get there. So I had to take the bus to Innsbruck and then the train to Bürs and then walk there. And I think it was in total like 3 hours to get there. Like the walking is only like 20 minutes, so it's really close to the train station. And it's also like the reason I choose that route, or like one of the reasons. I always wanted to try it, but I checked the guidebooks and just check which route is like close to a train station. So it was like 6 hours a day to like get there and get back. And you can only climb there in winter, so like you don't have a lot of time there to climb. I think you spend more time like getting there and getting home than climbing. But I think during that time it was really important for me to put so much effort into it. Maybe that sounds weird, but like yeah, it was like, as I said, it was like the first route I did by public transport. And I yeah, it was really important that I did something challenging. And maybe this is something the listeners can understand, that you like, yeah, you want to put yourself through something that it's really challenging for yourself. And also this like public transport part was challenging because yeah, you have to leave earlier because you have to get the train, or it's like really cold there, it's like in the shade and you're like freezing, and then you want to jump in the car and get your like yeah, have it warm, but then you have to walk there and go back by train. But I think during that time it was really like, it was the best thing I could have done because I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it was really good.
So you spoke a little bit to the practical side. From a mental side, if you on the train you have to worry a little bit more about the logistics and how to get there and stuff, right? But on the other side, you don't have the stress of actually having to drive, potentially being in a traffic jam and stuff. Did you, and you've done this now many times over, did you feel like, do you feel like doing public transportation is more relaxing or more stressful? How does that feel for you, especially when you go out climbing a hard route, right? I mean, you need to be on point. You can't just show up there and say, whatever. Like you actually need to perform the highest level.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that actually changed for me. I think right now, or over time, it got way more relaxing because you just have to figure out like how everything works, like which app you use, which train can you take, like in which train can you take your bike so you can go to the crack by bike then. And I think it's way more relaxing now because you can just use the time in the train freely. I mean, you can read, you can work, you can actually do something, while compared to sitting in a car, you can basically do nothing and just like drive and concentrate. So I think you get to the crack way more relaxed. And if you combine it like with biking, which I often do, to like just go or reach the crack, because obviously, I mean, the train stations are not like close to the crack. So you're already warm if you bike for like 10 or 20 minutes, and you don't have traffic jams or issues with parking and everything. So I think it's way more relaxing. But I think that depends on like where you live, because if you have to bike for like, I don't know, 1.5 hours to go somewhere climbing, of course then it's way more challenging because you're already tired. And you have to take this into account when you climb, because then you have to train also for endurance if you're a climber, which we rarely do. So I think it definitely depends on where you live and on your fitness, but I think it's way more relaxing. And like taking the train has a lot of advantages.
I think that is true. I remember when when you first move to a big city, especially if you didn't grow up in a big city and you're used to driving the car because in a small town that's easier to get around, and it is super exhausting at first trying to figure out the subway system or the bus system or so. And after a few months of doing this, you kind of get a feel for, okay, that bus is always 10 minutes late, and this bus is always overcrowded, right? You sort of start to get into a rhythm, and then you start easing up. I mean, people in New York take the subway all day long, and they're perfectly comfortable figuring out this crazy system. I think when you come as a tourist to New York, you're probably completely overwhelmed trying to figure this out. And after a while, you sort of start switching your mind. I remember living in Munich for a while, and you start thinking of the way the city is laid out, not in the way the street network is, but the way the subway system is, right? You know exactly, okay, I need to go, 3 stops on the blue line. I don't know what streets those are, but I'll pop out the top and I'm there, right? And so I think you start relaxing once you get comfortable and once you practice it, right? Which in some respects is sort of the way we adopt a lot of things in our life, right? At first it feels uncomfortable and then becomes second nature.
Yeah, and that's also like the good part of it, right? Of course, like it takes some time until you get comfortable with it, but like this new challenge can also be seen as something positive, because I think we all seek for adventures also in our daily lives, and so I think this, yeah, maybe if you feel uncomfortable in the beginning and don't know how everything is going to work out during that day climbing or like running or whatever, if you take public transport or the bike, then I think this can also be something positive and something you can look forward to, like the challenge itself.
No, absolutely. A friend of mine did a long run where he ran from his home, like, I don't know, 5 miles or so to the train station, and then took the train just 30 miles up and got out of the train and then just ran home. And he wanted that long challenge of, I need a really long run, and I want to force myself to have to get home, right? To not be able to, I'm going to cut it short or so, right? And so he took the train really far, and then he was forced to come all the way back, which is sort of another interesting way of approaching this. So you did this incredibly hard climb, first time on that difficulty scale for a German woman, which is incredible. Kudos to that particularly achievement in itself. But you did it with public transportation, and that opened something up for you to the point that you sort of made a name for yourself with doing that. Tell me a little bit, like, what was sort of the aftermath after that? You had already mentioned a little bit, so the media jumped on that, but obviously you sort of turned this into your brand a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it was kind of like I didn't plan on this, and I think there were several things that like came together. So I work at the university and do my PhD there, but like the funding is not good, unfortunately, for climate research. And so it happened to be.
Why would the funding be good for something as trivial as climate research?
Yeah. That's another story, but yeah. So it's this is really like it's really a big issue. And I don't know how this is in the US, but it's horrible in Europe, and it is really challenging to be able to live from like a PhD position, because I didn't have one at that time. Anyway, I had a scholarship, and then the money was cut short, and I was like getting a lot of people asking me to talk about this like sustainable climbing, and I was like, okay, like then I started as a freelancer, like next to my PhD, and then of course I put a lot of effort into like being a freelancer as well and talk about climate friendly climbing. And I think so it was this route, and then like the situation at the university, which then got me into just doing this as part of my job now. And I think I've kind of always like looked for something on how to connect with people on talking about the climate crisis, because like I've been part of Scientists for Future, it's called. It's like something like it's they're scientists and they're supporting the Fridays for Future movement, like the young people that go to the streets and demand climate action. And I think as a researcher, it's really difficult to talk to people, and I think it's way nicer if you come from a like sports perspective, and if you can, yeah, you can reach people way more easily and talk about climate solutions and how we can all, like, what we can all change to do our favorite sport more sustainable. And I think this, yeah, this was really something I found to be one of the things that are really close to my heart, are really important to me. And so yeah, I started doing talks and write articles, and then I wrote this book from last summer until it got published this spring. It was a huge part of my job last year, and we wrote a sustainable climbing guide. So like all the information that I had, I put together with a friend, and it's available for free now because yeah, we think climate-friendly mobility must be accessible for everyone. And this got also a huge part of my job, and I want to do it for a lot of areas together with the locals, because I think it's really important to like provide information for people on how they can be more sustainable. Because like my experience was, it is challenging, like to figure out how do I get there, like which cracks can I even go to by public transport or by bike. And I think it's just way more easier if you can look that up in a guidebook and if the information is out there. Because I don't know how this is in ultra running or in running, but like in climbing there, it's like there's no information out there, or there are no people like talking about this. Like all the brands, like the values they have is often like who climbs the hardest route and like goes to the place that is furthest away, but like not how they get there. And like there are no idols on sustainable climbing, or yeah, and no information out there. And this has become like a huge part of my life now, to work on that and make this information accessible for everyone.
Now, this is incredible, and I want to talk about the book at length in a little bit, but have you seen the movie Don't Look Up on Netflix? Is everybody asking
I
you about it?
a lot of people actually do, and to be honest, I haven't, because I won't stand it.
Yeah,
So
it's
yeah.
too close to.
So the thing is, I'm really like, yeah, it's too close to what I do like the whole day, because like climate research and talking about climbing and climate, and then at some point I have to like really get away from this, because I would just cry, whatever, I guess. So so I haven't, but I think it's good that it's out there. I have heard a lot and read a lot about it, but no, yeah, I haven't seen it.
I almost figured that that's what you would answer, but I wanted to bring it up because I think, I think a lot of people have seen it, and people who haven't should really watch it, because I think it's it's an incredibly painful perspective on how researchers and scientists ring the alarm bells and say something is going to destroy us all. And everybody is just sort of taking it lightly, making fun of it, and is sort of ignoring it. And especially the media sort of almost using the scientists as props of like, okay, let's have a little bit of a segment here, and then we kind of pat you on the back and make fun of you, because really this is supposed to be a happy news show, and we're not trying to freak people out, right? And so so with other words, you've already answered the question, is how close to home does that hit, right? I mean, I feel you must, I mean, especially as a researcher, you must be aware of the realities of our climate crisis in a way that it's almost unhealthy for you, and if we as people would know about it, right? I mean, it's sort of this, how much should we know before we become suicidal, before we don't have the will to actually do something about it anymore, and give up?
I think if you work like as I do, or if I deal with the topic of the climate crisis on a daily basis, I think it's important to like turn it into something positive. And this is something I've done with like the freelancer part. I definitely don't do this at my science part, because there I'm just researching and it's just like finding out all those crazy things, and you like reading the papers and stuff. I mean, this is not something that's like positive in any way. But I love this part of my job as well. I love doing research, but I think like turning this knowledge into something positive is really helping a lot. Like, and I do feel a lot of hope, but I think that this hope comes from like acting. Like, it's really hard work to have this hope. But since I started like talking about it more and getting to know more people and people that are interested, it's it's really positive. So I think you have to get away from it from time to time, but it's, if you deal with it on a daily basis, I think you have to turn it into something that is healthy and that is positive. Because I remember when I started like reconsidering a lot of my habits, I thought like, okay, if I, as a researcher, as a climate researcher, if I'm not going to do anything about it, then like who's going to do it? Like, if I'm like, so I think the climate, or the facts about the climate crisis that I learned at university or that I'm dealing with, have inspired me to act on this. This maybe sounds really nerdy, but I think it definitely had a huge impact on me. And I hope to, or for myself, I've turned it into something very positive, and I really hope to maybe also inspire other people to not be hopeless, but to turn their maybe fears, or eco-anxiety is a big issue also, like to turn this into something positive and to get going, because then you realize you do have a lot of power and you do have a lot of impact. If I would have never imagined where I'm now compared to like a few years like back, and once you start like talking about it and talking to people about the like solutions and the problems that there are, then you get a lot of like you have a lot of impact with what you're doing. That's basically what helps.
You were saying that it's hard work, but I think there's a misconception, and correct me if you see it differently, but it's uncomfortable and the habit change is hard. But I don't think necessarily our new life needs to be hard. I think that's sort of what a lot of people misunderstand, right? I think the people who look at this on the surface, they just think we need to go back to the Middle Ages, and right. I mean, there is and everything's going to be hard and uncomfortable and dirty, and we can't do anything anymore. But that's not the end goal of a sustainable society. It's really the habit changing. And I'm using that very simple example of when we here in Washington State, and we sort of did it region by region, different cities they enacted a plastic bag ban in grocery stores. And when I first came to this country, literally you went to the grocery store and you bought 6 items and you got 3 different plastic bags, sometimes double bagged because it was a little bit heavier or something. You ended up with 5 throwaway plastic bags for 6 items, right? And when we sort of city by city, and I think now it's statewide, sort of enacted this plastic bag ban, then everybody was like up in arms and we're saying, well, how am I going to carry my groceries and stuff, right? And they were freaking out. And now it's enacted and everybody just brings their bags and it's perfectly fine, right? And so this transition felt extremely hard, and people could not figure out how to carry their groceries. And now everybody just brings their own bags and it's perfectly fine, right? Is it hard now to remember your groceries? No, grocery bags? No, it's not hard. It's just a little bit of a change in mindset, right? And I mean, this is sort of one of the most simplest and surface level examples of where it might temporarily feel hard when we sort of have a habit, but once we're sort of through this, then it's like, why did we ever use all of these shitty plastic bags, right?
Yeah. I totally agree with you. It's like the change is hard, but as we talked like earlier, like this change can also be a challenge, and it can also be positive, and then it's like as good, or like I can say that it's like better now. So like transforming my climbing from like just having a van and going climbing everywhere by using my van, and now doing this by public transport and by bike mostly. This has been like awesome. Honestly, it's been so great, and it's even better than before. So it's not even like the same, but it can also like improve things. And so I think no one must fear like the changes that are coming. It's about to like create a better world that is, yeah, that is more sustainable and also healthier for us. And yeah, also maybe, yeah, we have to ask ourselves like what is really important and what do we actually need. And I think this can also be a really positive change, or I'm convinced that this is going to be a positive change for all of us.
There is some compromise, right? I mean, there are certain crags that you just absolutely cannot get to without a car, right? But I think this is where the storytelling comes in, right? This is where your book comes in. That if you start talking about the locations that you can actually access, you just sort of shift the perspective on what is also cool, right? Because in many ways, some of these crags, or some of these locations, routes, or whatever, right? They've only become cool because somebody did it once, right? I mean, sometimes it's arbitrary. Sometimes it's not like, well, I can't do the most beautiful routes anymore, right? Sometimes it's just, well, actually, the most beautiful routes are there. We just have to discover them.
Yeah, right. So I think it shifts the perspective on like what's possible, and that's like the good part of it, that you can talk about solutions and what is like, yeah, accessible still. And I mean, if you want to go to a crag where you like, which you can't reach by public transport, I mean, then you use the car. But if you use the transport on a more, or the public transport on a more regular basis, then it's already great. It's already a good thing to do. It's not about like giving up on everything that you've ever done, and like, or like on your, like the routes that you want to climb and that are maybe a bit like far away and you can't reach by public transport. But it's about like changing your daily habits. And I can just encourage everyone to just try it, and then maybe they will figure out that that's not too bad, and then they will do it again. It's not like being perfect 100% in one part of your life, like mobility or like diet or consumption. It's about like trying the best in like all of these parts, and not forgetting like the big picture, and also trying to implement those changes also on a political or on a societal level, like talk to your friends or family about climate solutions, or like go to the streets and strike or vote. I mean, there are a lot of things that we can do, and it's about, yeah, like starting to do something, and go in the right direction, and not looking into all the things that you cannot do anymore, because that's like just not the case. Yeah.
Now to your book. Fold it open. Give people a little bit of an idea of like, how did you lay out how you talked about this particular route in conjunction with how to get to it with public transportation? Because I find this a really fun and interesting way of how you sort of incorporated the travel to the crag sort of into the actual climb.
Yeah. So the guide is like, so it's not really a climbing guide, but it's a guide who shows you how to get to the crag. So if you open it, then you have 21 crags that can be reached by public transport or by bike, and you
And they're
see.
all in the Innsbruck area,
Yeah,
right?
they're all in the Innsbruck area. Like they can reach by Innsbruck, but also like from the Tyrolean area, you can reach those crags, and you get some information on like how to get there, which train do you use, or which bus do you use, or how long is the cycle route, where's the cycle path, or and so on. And you have a like a map, and then you have a short description of the area, which shows like is it family friendly? How many routes are there? How difficult are they? Is it sunshade, exposition, like all these things? And then you get a QR code to the topo of the crag, so you know which routes are there and how hard are they. but it's really, the guidebook itself really focuses on like the approach, like how to get there. And then it's divided into like different areas around Innsbruck. And for each area, we have like some eco facts. So like facts about the nature, like what is really special in this area, like plants that are growing there, just to like make nature or the make nature more accessible, or the great things about nature more accessible to people. So maybe we hope that they see that it's like important to protect it because they know maybe some facts about it. So yeah, and then we have some general facts about mobility, like I don't know, for example, like 40% of the times that people use a car in Austria is for less than 5 kilometers. So things like this, just like facts about mobility. And yeah, that's it. That's a guide. It's just, I think it's, or I've never seen something like this, but I would really hope to see in some other guidebooks for climbing, but also I think it's the same for mountain biking or for traveling or for running, like to integrate the approach on how to get there. I think that would be great to have this accessible for other sports as well. And maybe we see this is going to change. And it mustn't be for all the cracks, but for the ones that it's possible, I think it would be great if it is implemented in the future.
Well, that's the interesting thing. I think for some it will not be possible. They're too far remote, but for others it will be possible. And if you tell that story, it will shift the focus, right? It will give you a new selection criteria. So for me, the American entrepreneur, why did you give it away for free and are not just immediately building an entire series and doing sustainable climbing guides, sustainable travel guides for the entire Alps? I mean, this feels like such a large brand, and I'm probably not the first one who asks you that question. But
yeah.
I mean, of course, you only know your crags, you only know your public transportation system, so it's a lot harder to do the same research in Südtirol or Switzerland, right? So it will be a lot more require a lot more research and less time and money to actually put something like that together. But theoretically, the focus is so unique and so special. You should just completely do it, right?
It's so I'm going to do this for other areas as well. And yeah, and I think for the next guides, I will definitely put like maybe a low price, but a price on it, because it's way easier for like sending them. Right now, we just like distribute it in the gym, and we have it online. It's for free on my website, and it's way harder to distribute if you cannot send it, because like I cannot send like tons of guides in my free time and pay all of this myself. Like this is not possible. So I think I will do it in the future for other areas and sell it. I think like when we started this, I think it was really important for us that it's for free, because then it gets outside of our bubble. Because I think often, like when we talk about the climate crisis or climate friendly climbing, it's like it only reaches the people that are already interested in it. And I did this guidebook together with a friend of mine, with Lena Müller. I studied with her, and I think for us it was really important that we reach people outside of our bubble, and I think we achieved this. And I think it's also really important that it's accessible for everyone. So I don't know how it is in the US, but public transport is comparatively expensive in Austria, or I think it's way too expensive. So it's not really accessible for everyone. And I think climate-friendly solutions should be, there should be no barrier on those and on this information. And I think we are really idealistic persons, so that's why we did it. But of course, like for the next time, I'm going to maybe put like a low price just to make some things easier. But it will definitely not be something like a normal guidebook that costs like 50 euros, because I think then again you have this like barrier, which where it doesn't reach as many people. And luckily there are also like foundation sponsors out there that support such projects, and I think if it's possible that they pay for it, for this, and then this information is accessible, then it's maybe more work for me, but it's better for everyone else.
I mean, I want to make a comment on the cost of public transportation, right? And it's really only expensive because we're subsidizing the wrong things, right? But I mean, I don't need to tell you that. You're fully aware of that.
yeah, it's right. Yeah.
No, but we are super lucky here. I live in Olympia. That's the capital of Washington State. And our bus system needed to be overhauled 2 or 3 years ago. And they looked into trying to figure out what it would cost to implement a payment system. So when you go into the bus, you pay your ticket, and they realized it was so expensive to implement a system that they decided it would be cheaper to just have all the buses free all the time. So our entire intercity transit system is effectively free.
No way, that's great. Yeah, that's awesome.
And I mean, you know, it's a bus system on the West Coast. It's not as dense and complete as a subway system in a European city, right? So you don't get everywhere all the time, but just the fact that it's free, it's kind of mind-boggling actually. And it's super cool. Like, I don't even know where the money comes from, but they made this announcement. At first, they made an announcement saying, okay, yeah, these couple major routes are going to be free. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And like 6 weeks later, and like, oh yeah, we did another study and we realized we can make the entire thing free. And I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, if they would put all the like subsidizing they do with fossil fuels into like public transport or green energy, this would be amazing. And and then people are using it. I mean, right now we in Germany, the last 3 months we had this like €9 ticket where we could go by public transport for €9 like for the whole month, and it was awesome. There were so many people in the train. Of course, there were too many people, and there were issues again. But it just showed that, like, yeah, it's possible. You just need a political will to do those things, and then people are going to change their habits, because it's like the most easiest and the cheapest option, and then things are going to change.
And even if it does cost something, right? I mean, the reason why we perceive it as being expensive is because we are currently still adding the cost of public transportation on top of the cost of car ownership, right? So we don't consider the actual cost of the car, the gas, the insurance and stuff,
definitely.
right? And so we perceive it as expensive, but comparatively, it actually is not. I'm still fascinated with your guide. I wrote a book, self-published a book 3-4 years ago that was called Adventure Running, and I sort of showed all of the trails that can be run in the local area. Some of them were so far, but I didn't include the approach. And so I'm just fascinated by this. And well, I mean, I want to steal your idea. That's what I'm saying, right? I mean, but it is a challenge. So from a research point of view, did you, because you've lived in Innsbruck and so therefore you knew all the crags already, it was fairly easy to kind of put the pieces together. Talk a little bit about how you kind of created the building blocks. Did you ride every single train and bus to kind of figure this out? How much of it was theoretical and how much was practical?
So as I lived there, I did. So I knew a lot of the cracks, and I went there just like because I just do it like in my free time. But for some of the cracks, we just researched it, and I think if you know the area, it's definitely possible. So I will do it for other areas, but I'm not living there, and it's totally possible. You definitely have to go there and be there for some time, but I think it's definitely possible to do this for for areas where you don't live in, just because you can do the research and or talk to locals and involve someone who's maybe living there, and then I think it's perfectly fine. So we didn't actually go to all the cracks that are in the guidebook, but to almost all of them.
Here we are, American listeners, American trail runners. Can you give us a couple ideas, a couple things to think about in how we can change our life over here? Because public transportation is really hard. Because I was just saying it's free, but it's like it's free in the city. Like you don't really, there's no bus that stops close to a park. Really, like I mean, it would actually take some interesting research and say, could you actually take a bus to a park where you could actually run? But if we move away from the public transportation piece, what can we do? We still love the outdoors. We still want to be out there. Can you give us a couple ideas where we could start thinking about how how bad is if we say, I want to fly to Europe to run a race over there? Should we really not fly anymore? Right? I mean, I'd love to hear a couple, I don't know, challenges from you.
So it's really not my place to tell people what they should do. But I mean, I think like from my perspective, it's it's three levels where you can invest your time and your energy if you want to do something about the climate crisis, and if you're interested in like protecting the places that you love. And I think this is like first we already talked about like political change. Like we need politicians that act in accordance to the Paris Agreement, that we stay below 1.5 degrees. So can vote or go to the climate strikes, like join associations to just demand political change, because this is like a huge factor, and it's really huge compared to like what we can do ourselves. And then the second thing is like that we need a change in society, so people start talking about it, like friends, family, or also in the public, like with where you're working. It depends on which like job you have and where you can invest your effort. But I think this is really important to get people on board. And for like your own carbon footprint, I think the first really good step is to calculate it. There are a lot of carbon footprint calculators online, and I think it's really important because you can see where is your biggest impact, or like the biggest part of your carbon footprint. And there are like we talked about mobility, like you can change to going somewhere by bike or public transport. Ideally, you would reduce or even stop flying, because this has a huge carbon footprint, or maybe reduce it to like once per year. It also depends on the job you're having. So this is a huge thing, but also like diet is a huge thing, like going vegan or vegetarian, or buying organic products and or local products. I think this is also a huge part, and depends on like where you're currently at in your current state. And then of course also like the housing, like how do you heat your house, like do you have the eco electricity contract? Like there are a lot of things that are pretty easy to change if you just consider like where you're at now. And and one of the big important things is also like consumption, and it's also related to our sport. I don't know how this is in running, but I assume you don't need, I don't know, 10 running shorts or whatever. I think this is also like a big part, and also what you consume in the daily life. So I think those are the parts where you can invest. And I think I would really encourage people to just calculate it first, because you can see how you will get better, and this makes like a good feeling. I remember when I first did that a few years back, and like a huge part of my footprint was obviously my mobility. That's why I changed that. And I don't know if this is different for running, because you can start like at your doorstep. But as you said, like people go to races or they go somewhere to run, to just like be in a great place in nature outdoors. Yeah, I don't know. I think those are the aspects that you can change. And climbing mobility is huge. And just by reducing this, you can, like I reduce my footprint by half, just by changing the mobility. And yeah, ideally, like the place where you have, or the part where you have the biggest impact, and the part that is like fun to change are like the same things. But I would also, yeah, I think it's also important to like start somewhere where you can, where you like to start, or which is fun for you. If you like to cook and you love to do like vegan dishes for your friends and family, inspire them to go vegan or whatever, I think it's really important to, yeah, to start somewhere where you like to invest your energy, because this is something that will multiply in your, like, the people that you know, and also in your own life. So yeah, this is maybe what I would encourage people to do.
This is a good answer. This is a good kind of summary in giving you different areas to poke in. I think for us as runners, our sort of daily training runs are mostly car free. We can start right out the front door. But as trail runners, as people who we like to run in the mountains and on trails, we often find ourselves every single weekend to drive to some trailhead. And we then often only meet up at the trailhead and drive. 3 people meet up and we drive for 3 different cars, right? I think there is so much that can be done. And on the weekends, getting to a trailhead is over here impossible with public transportation. You could ride your bike there. That would sort of give you a different aerobic activity, and you wouldn't completely exhaust yourself, because you don't want to run 6 miles to get to a trailhead and then start running in the mountains, right? And you're already exhausted, and you have to run the 6 miles back, right? So sometimes these logistics are really hard, but in general, the idea of like carpooling or biking to a trailhead, I think those are some really easy wins. And then for me, I organize some trail races here in the area too. I've been really trying hard not to give people plastic or medals and t-shirts and all of that kind of stuff that anyway gets thrown away, right? And so I'm thinking about this as well. I'm like, okay, how can I sort of reduce that footprint for my runners that come to my races? I have a carbon calculator for trail race directors, where you can sort of multiply, okay, you've got 200 people coming, how many miles, what's the impact? And it's a challenge, because over here, if you have a trail race, people have to drive to it, and the races are often not big enough that you can provide public transportation to the accident, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, of course. Like it always depends on where you live and what's possible. I think if public transport is not an option, then, as you said, like biking is great. I don't know how it is with e-bikes in the US. So this got huge in Europe, and I got one myself. I think one, like, since last year, I have a cooperation and I have an e-bike now. And it's really great, for example, for here, for the Allgäu region where I'm currently at in Germany, because there is no public transport. You get nowhere here by public transport. But if I would bike to the crag, it would take like forever. But if I go to the crag by e-bike, it takes like, depending on the crag, 20 to 50 minutes, and I still have energy left. So I think this is, like, e-bikes is a really great thing, because you can charge it with green electricity, and like it's not as heavy as an e-car, like you don't need to charge as much, or don't need as much as electricity. So I think like the e-bike option or a bike option is also great. And yeah, if this is not possible, then of course, like an electric car is always the better option than a car based on fossil fuels, because yeah, we just have to get rid of them.
well, Lena, no, those were awesome. I think it was really a good conversation, right? We sort of scratched the surface. We didn't really dive super deep in, but we sort of, I hope we can get some people thinking about their personal consumption, their personal sort of carbon footprint. Sort of, I know this in many ways can be perceived as a challenging conversation, but as you're saying, right, this can be a challenge. We as trail runners, we like uncomfortable challenges, right? I mean, that's why we're doing this, right? Let's sort of embrace this.
Yeah.
And we'll be willing to dive into this and ask some hard questions, and as you're saying, find some things that we can be passionate about, because that has that multiplying effect. So I think that's really good. Lena, thank you so much. Before I let you go, do you want to tell people where they can learn more about you, reach out, find out what you're up to, where they can see what you're doing, and download your sustainable climbing guide, even if they don't live in Innsbruck?
Yes.
Innsbruck.
Yeah. So you can reach me via my website, which is lenamuller.com, and on Instagram on you can maybe tag it. I don't know. It's Lena Marie.
Yeah. I'll put it in the show notes.
MLLR, genau. And the climbing guide is also on my website. You find it, and there's also my email. You can reach out if you have any questions. And yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was a really nice conversation. It's really great to reach out to people and to talk to people about this topic. I always find it great that people are interested in this, because this gives me hope that we are on a good way to a more sustainable future, because people want to know about this. So thanks for having me.